Good evening and welcome to our discussion. Tonight we delve into a profoundly serious and often contentious question. Is the death penalty justified for mass murder? This issue touches upon our deepest notions of justice, morality, and the value of human life. It forces us to confront the darkest aspects of human behavior and consider how society should respond. We have two distinguished guests to help us navigate this complex terrain. Arguing in favor of the death penalty is Mr. David Chen, a former prosecutor with extensive experience in capital cases. And arguing against is Ms. Sarah Jones, a renowned human rights lawyer who has dedicated her career to defending the fundamental rights of all individuals. Welcome to you both. Our debate will begin with opening statements from each speaker, followed by rebuttals. We will then move into a period of discussion and cross-examination, concluding with closing statements.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Good evening. The question before us tonight is indeed a grave one, but in certain horrific circumstances, the answer must be an unequivocal yes. The death penalty is justified, and I would argue necessary, for the crime of mass murder. When an individual perpetrates an act of mass murder, they commit an atrocity that tears at the very fabric of our society. They extinguish multiple innocent lives, inflict unimaginable suffering on families and communities, and demonstrate an absolute contempt for human dignity. In such cases, the pursuit of justice demands a punishment that reflects the enormity of the crime. For the families of victims, the death penalty can represent a form of retribution, a recognition that the life of their loved one was valued, and that the perpetrator has paid the ultimate price for their actions. It offers a sense of closure, however imperfect, that life imprisonment simply cannot provide. Society, too, has a right to express its profound condemnation of such acts. The death penalty serves as an unambiguous statement that such monstrous behavior will not be tolerated, and that some crimes are so heinous they forfeit the perpetrator's right to life. While the deterrent effect of capital punishment is a subject of ongoing debate, and I acknowledge that, its role in incapacitating the most dangerous offenders is undeniable. Executing a convicted mass murderer ensures they will never kill again, providing ultimate protection to society. Furthermore, mass murder is distinct. It is not a crime of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. It often involves meticulous planning and a deliberate intent to cause widespread death and terror. The scale and nature of this crime set it apart, demanding a unique and ultimate response from our justice system. To sentence such individuals to anything less than death can be perceived as devaluing the lives they so brutally extinguished. It is about proportionality, about ensuring the punishment fits the crime in its most extreme form.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Good evening. While I understand the deep emotional desire for retribution in the face of such horrific crimes as mass murder, I stand firmly against the death penalty, in all circumstances, without exception. My opposition is rooted in the fundamental belief in the sanctity of human life and the inherent dignity of every individual, regardless of the crimes they may have committed. State-sanctioned killing, in my view, diminishes us all. It perpetuates a cycle of violence, rather than offering a path towards a more humane and just society. One of the most compelling arguments against capital punishment is the undeniable and irreversible risk of executing an innocent person. Our justice systems, for all their safeguards, are fallible. They are administered by human beings, susceptible to error, bias, and pressure. We have seen numerous cases where individuals sentenced to death have later been exonerated, sometimes after decades on death row. The execution of even one innocent person is an intolerable injustice, a stain on our collective conscience that can never be erased. Furthermore, the application of the death penalty is often fraught with systemic issues. There are significant concerns about racial and socioeconomic bias influencing who is sentenced to death. The quality of legal representation can vary dramatically, meaning those who cannot afford adequate defense are often at a greater disadvantage, even in cases of mass murder, where guilt might seem beyond doubt. these systemic flaws persist, making the fair and equitable application of the ultimate penalty virtually impossible. We cannot allow the understandable outrage following a terrible crime to blind us to these fundamental issues of justice. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole serves as a perfectly adequate alternative. It ensures that perpetrators of heinous crimes are permanently removed from society, unable to cause further harm, while upholding our moral objection to the state taking a human life. It allows for the possibility of error to be rectified however late, and affirms that our society, even when faced with extreme provocation, chooses not to kill.
Ms. Jones raises important points about the sanctity of life and the risk of error, and I do not dismiss these concerns lightly. However, when we speak of mass murder, we are often dealing with cases where the evidence is overwhelming, the guilt irrefutable, and the perpetrator's actions have demonstrated a complete negation of the sanctity of multiple other lives. The argument about potential innocence, while valid in the broader discussion of capital punishment, becomes less compelling when confronted with the brutal certainty often present in mass murder convictions. We must also ask, what about the sanctity of the lives of the victims? Does a life sentence truly honor their stolen futures and the profound loss experienced by their families? Ms. Jones speaks of a, quote, cycle of violence, but I contend that the execution of a mass murderer is not an act of vengeance, but a deliberate, judicially sanctioned act of ultimate justice and societal protection. It is a recognition that some individuals, through their calculated and horrific actions, place themselves beyond the pale of human society and forfeit their own right to life. Life imprisonment, while ensuring incapacitation, may not always provide the necessary sense of justice, or adequately reflect the unique gravity of annihilating numerous lives. The families of victims often feel that anything less than the ultimate penalty diminishes the scale of their loss. We must consider their profound suffering in this equation. The focus on the perpetrator's rights, while crucial in a just system, should not entirely overshadow the rights and needs of the victims and society at large when dealing with crimes of this magnitude. A balance must be struck, and in cases of mass murder, that balance, I believe, leans towards the death penalty as a proportionate response.
Mr. Chen emphasizes justice for victims and the unique gravity of mass murder, and I wholeheartedly agree that these crimes are abhorrent and demand a severe response. However, I fundamentally disagree that this response must be the death penalty. The concept of an eye for an eye, while emotionally resonant for some, ultimately leads to a society that mirrors the violence it condemns. A civilized society, in my opinion, must rise above such retributive instincts. True justice is not about replicating the harm done, but about upholding our highest principles, even when faced with the worst of humanity. Executing individuals, even those who have committed terrible atrocities, does not achieve this. It merely lowers the state to the level of the killer. Mr. Chen suggests that evidence in mass murder cases is often overwhelming. While this may sometimes be true, the justice system is not infallible. High-profile cases can generate immense public and political pressure, potentially leading to rushed judgments or overlooked exculpatory evidence. The finality of the death penalty means that any such error, if discovered later, is catastrophic and irreparable. Life imprisonment without parole effectively neutralizes any future threat from the offender and unequivocally punishes them for their crimes. It allows society to express its condemnation and protect itself without resorting to killing. It also preserves the possibility, however remote, that new evidence might emerge, or that our understanding of justice might evolve. Furthermore, focusing solely on retribution risks, overlooking the complex factors that can contribute to such horrific acts, while not excusing them, a justice system that seeks only to kill may miss opportunities to understand and prevent future violence. We must strive for a system that is both just and constructive, and the death penalty, in my view, is neither.
Thank you both for those compelling rebuttals. Let's delve deeper into some of these critical issues. Mr. Chen, you advocate for the death penalty as ultimate justice. How do you reconcile this demand with the undeniable, albeit perhaps small in some cases you describe, possibility of judicial error that Ms. Jones highlighted? Is any risk of executing an innocent person acceptable in the pursuit of this ultimate justice for mass murderers?
Dr. Hayes, that is the most serious concern, and one that any proponent of capital punishment must grapple with. My position is that in cases of mass murder, the evidentiary standards must be, and often are, extraordinarily high. Beyond any shadow of a doubt, not just beyond a reasonable doubt, we should strive for a system with exhaustive appeals and reviews, particularly for capital cases involving such crimes. However, if after every possible safeguard has been employed, the evidence of guilt for a calculated, horrific mass killing is irrefutable, then the small residual risk of error, while never zero, must be weighed against the certainty of the injustice done to multiple victims, and the ongoing trauma to their families, if the ultimate penalty is not imposed. It's a terrible calculus, but one that society, through its laws, must sometimes make.
Ms. Jones, you argue for life imprisonment as a sufficient alternative. If not the death penalty, what specific measures, beyond incarceration, can assure the public that convicted mass murderers will never pose a threat again, either within prison or through some unforeseen circumstance? And how does life imprisonment truly address the profound, often lifelong sense of injustice and devastation felt by victims' families, who may feel it's an inadequate response to the loss of many lives?
Dr. Hayes, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole is, by definition, a sentence that ensures the individual will die in prison. Modern supermax facilities are designed to prevent escape and severely limit any influence an inmate might have, even within the prison system. The never a threat again aspect is very robustly addressed by this sentence. Regarding the family's sense of injustice, this is incredibly difficult, and their pain is unimaginable. However, I believe that state-sanctioned killing does not truly bring healing or balance the scales. Instead, we should focus on providing comprehensive, lifelong support for victims' families, psychological, financial, and emotional. True justice for them might also lie in ensuring such tragedies are prevented in the future, through addressing root causes of violence, rather than in replicating killing.
Mr. Chen, perhaps you'd like to pose a question directly to Ms. Jones?
Ms. Jones, you speak of the sanctity of life for the perpetrator. If a convicted mass murderer, who has meticulously planned and executed the slaughter of dozens of innocent people, shows no remorse, and is proven beyond any conceivable doubt to have committed these atrocities, how does sentencing them to life imprisonment, where they continue to exist, to be fed, clothed, and sheltered by the state, truly reflect the immense value of the numerous lives they deliberately and cruelly extinguished? Does it not, in a way, devalue the victims?
Mr. Chen, I believe that upholding the sanctity of all life, even that of someone who has committed unspeakable acts, is a testament to our society's moral strength, not a weakness. It demonstrates that we will not stoop to the level of the killer. The value of the victims' lives is not affirmed by taking another life. It is affirmed by our unwavering commitment to justice, due process, and human dignity for all. Life imprisonment without parole is an incredibly severe punishment. It is a complete deprivation of liberty, a life spent contemplating the horrors they inflicted. It is not an easy existence, and it serves as a constant reminder of society's condemnation, without making society itself a killer.
And Ms. Jones, a question for Mr. Chen.
Mr. Chen, you advocate for the death penalty in these extreme cases. However, given the well-documented systemic biases within our justice systems, racial, economic, geographic, how can we ever be truly confident that the death penalty, if applied even for mass murder, wouldn't disproportionately affect marginalized or vulnerable groups, or be influenced by factors other than the pure pursuit of objective justice. Are you not concerned that this ultimate, irreversible penalty could compound existing injustices?
That is a critical concern, Ms. Jones, and one that demands constant vigilance and reform within our justice system. Any bias is unacceptable. However, the argument against the death penalty, based on potential misapplication in some cases, should not necessarily negate its justification for correctly identified, truly heinous crimes like mass murder, where guilt is absolute and the crime's nature cries out for the ultimate penalty. The solution, in my view, is not to abolish the death penalty for the worst of the worst, but to redouble our efforts to eradicate bias from the system entirely, ensuring that if capital punishment is to be used, it is applied with scrupulous fairness and only in the most egregious, clearly proven circumstances, regardless of the defendant's background. The focus should be on perfecting the process, not abandoning a just, albeit ultimate, sanction for unparalleled evil. In closing, I return to the fundamental principle of justice. For victims of mass murder, and for society as a whole, the death penalty can be the only proportionate response to crimes of such unimaginable horror. It is not about vengeance, but about affirming the supreme value of innocent life by imposing the ultimate consequence on those who willfully and massively destroy it. We must acknowledge the unique nature of mass murder. These are not ordinary crimes. They are attacks on our collective humanity. While we strive for a perfect justice system, the theoretical risk of error, especially when weighed against near-certain guilt in many such cases, should not paralyze us from delivering the justice that these extreme situations demand. Life imprisonment, while severe, simply may not equate to the scale of loss and devastation. For the sake of societal condemnation, for the protection of the innocent, and for the profound need for justice for those whose lives were so cruelly and numerously taken, the death penalty must remain a justified option for the perpetrators of mass murder. Some actions are so evil, they irrevocably forfeit the right to life.
In my concluding remarks, I reiterate that a just and humane society must not resort to killing, even when faced with the most heinous crimes. The death penalty is a cruel, inhuman, and degrading punishment that violates the fundamental right to life. It offers a false promise of closure while risking irreversible error and perpetuating a cycle of violence. We must resist the understandable urge for retribution that mass murder evokes, and instead uphold our deepest moral commitments. Life imprisonment without parole effectively protects society, punishes offenders severely, and preserves the possibility of rectifying wrongful convictions. It allows us to condemn horrific acts without becoming complicit in killing. Choosing not to execute, even those who have committed unimaginable atrocities, is a mark of a mature and civilized society. It signifies our commitment to human dignity for all, and our belief that justice can be served without resorting to the ultimate, irrevocable act of taking a human life. Let us seek justice, yes, but let it be a justice tempered with mercy and an unwavering respect for life.
Thank you, Mr. Chen and Ms. Jones, for this deeply insightful and thought-provoking debate. You have both articulated your positions with clarity, passion, and profound respect for the gravity of the subject matter. We've heard compelling arguments on both sides. Mr. Chen advocating for the death penalty as a just and proportionate response to mass murder, emphasizing victims' rights and societal condemnation, and Ms. Jones arguing against it, citing the sanctity of life, the risk of error, and the moral stance of the state. The question of whether the death penalty is justified for mass murder is indeed one with no easy answers, touching upon complex legal, ethical, and emotional considerations. We hope this discussion has provided our audience with a richer understanding of these multifaceted perspectives. We encourage everyone to continue reflecting on these critical issues. Thank you for joining us this evening.